warm welcome to everybody this evening from a rather cold and wet southwest of France. I live in the Cathar area of France, which is something that I think will come up in the course of Anne's talk this evening. And before I say anything more, I'm just going to light a candle, as this is, I think, a sacred occasion. So here's the candle, I'm just lighting it. So that will keep burning while we're during the session, and I'll blow it out at the end. So it's a really a great pleasure to welcome you all this evening to this very important session, I think, because what Anne's going to be talking about really gets to the essence of where we are as humans in our stage of evolution and what we need to do in order to evolve to the next stage. And how we need to, as with the earlier webinar with Riane Eisler, move from this domination system to more of a partnership system. So just to say a little bit about Anne and I've known each other for over 30 years. And we used to have some wonderful local network groups in her house in Alresford in Hampshire, which was really very memorable. So it's a beautiful house. So Anne has been connected with the network for a long time, and she is an honorary member. Those of you who have last December's issue, you'll see that in the network news it was announced that Anne had been made an honorary member. And for those of you who don't know so much about her work, her early work in the early 90s was The Myth of the Goddess, Evolution of an Image. And she's written many books on the feminine principle and the soul, and also with Scilla Elworthy's Soul Power, an Agenda for a Conscious Humanity. And her most recent magnum opus is The Dream of the Cosmos, A Quest for the Soul, which we gave the book prize in 2013. And she's also written or adapted the Birds Who Flew Beyond Time, which is based on the Sufi text, The Conference of the Birds. And she writes here that the ground of all her work is a deep interest in history, as well as the spiritual, mythological, shamanic, and artistic traditions of different cultures. Her work is devoted to the affirmation of a new vision of reality and the issues facing us at this crucial time of choice. So I think that's really enough from me. I'm going to hand you over to Anne, who's going to begin to share her screen and give her talk. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a break after she's finished her talk. Then we'll have a brief introduction just to tell you what's coming up and also to the Scientific and Medical Network. And then we'll be open for questions along the lines that Andrew has already explained. So warm welcome again, and Anne, over to you.
Thank you so much, David. It's lovely to be here. And greetings to everyone, either morning or evening, wherever you are. It's lovely to be with you. So this talk is in response to the question, why are we faced with climate change, the greatest challenge to confront us since the sudden melting of the glaciers and the Great Flood? The evolution of consciousness on this planet has been a slow and arduous process that can be divided into three main phases that I have named lunar, solar, and stellar. We are now in a time of transition when we are moving out of the solar era, which has lasted some 4,000 years, and into the stellar era. We are rediscovering something that we once knew and have forgotten, that we are inseparable from the earth that sustains our life. As you know, this is a time of great peril, not only from the pandemic, but from the harm we have inflicted on the earth, and from the existence of 14,000 nuclear weapons held by the 9 nuclear powers. This talk is about why we have lost touch with nature and why we have learned so little from our spiritual traditions that we are prepared to destroy life on a massive scale with these demonic weapons. The function of the feminine is to bring things together that have been separated or split apart. This is the main theme of my talk, which has been written with the help of both hemispheres of the brain, as well as the heart. To begin with, I need to summarize the significance of lunar culture, because this is the foundation of everything that succeeded it, and few people know about it. In Europe, it lasted for a very long time, from at least 40,000 BCE to around 2000 CE. It was, in every sense, a shamanic culture, and the moon was of primary significance throughout this time. The principal theme of lunar culture is birth, death, and regeneration, based on the cycle of the moon and the cycle of the seasons. At this time, creation was believed to emerge from the womb of the Great Mother, who was worshipped as the ruler of sky, earth, and underworld, the three domains. Life was an organic, living, and sacred whole. All forms of life participated in the web of life that was the life of the Great Mother. The Milky Way was the passageway by which souls entered and left this world. And the shamanic journey into the other world was the spiritual experience throughout this time. And the two figures that you see on the left and the right date to around 25,000 BCE and are both from the Dordogne area in France. The most important fact about this time was that there was no creator beyond creation, no separation between the Great Mother as source and the myriad forms of her life, no separation, therefore, between spirit as deity and nature. The Great Mother was both the starry cosmos and all life on earth, and a major theme of lunar culture was relationship. Just as the stars emerged each night from the darkness of the night sky, so the visible universe was born from the dark mystery of the invisible. Everything was infused with divinity because all were part of a living, breathing, connecting web of life, animated by spirit. Nature was ensouled because spirit was present in every aspect of the manifest world. The air was sacred, water was sacred, rocks, plants, trees, and animals were sacred and could communicate with man. People therefore lived within a sacred order, the order of the Great Mother. Now, these Paleolithic and Neolithic cultures were shamanic cultures, guided by men and women who had a profound knowledge of plants, animals, and the spirit world, and who were able to experience cosmic consciousness, possibly through taking psychedelic drugs or some plant drugs. Sacred places in the landscape marked the entry into the spirit world that the pre-Socratic Greeks called the immortal realm. The consciousness of that time was different from the one we have now. It was an instinctive, participatory consciousness, able to enter both dimensions of reality. In the Neolithic era, these shamans were extraordinary mathematicians, astronomers, and architects, building observatory temples like Stonehenge for tracking the sun, the moon, and the stars. Their intention in building these monuments was to maintain a harmonious relationship with the cosmos, so that through ritual, the human community could align itself with it. This ancient knowledge has been preserved by many indigenous communities today who have retained the awareness that all life is sacred and the ability to enter altered states of consciousness, which we have lost. There was no hierarchy in these communities, nor was there gender supremacy, although they may have been matrilineal. They were what Riane Eisler has called participatory societies or partnership societies. Men and women each had their respective roles and skills that contributed to their survival in the harsh conditions of that time. In Europe, this long period culminated in what the archaeologist Marija Gimbutas called the civilization of Old Europe, or the civilization of the goddess, which lasted for 3,000 years, from 6,500 to 3,500 BCE. That's an awful long time, 1,000 years more than the Christian era. Throughout this time, the Great Mother, or the goddess, was the deity worshipped. Gimbutas found no evidence of conflict or war until patriarchal warrior Kurgan tribes descending from the Russian steppes inaugurated an era of enormous social and political change. As they spread westwards and eastwards as far as India, they gradually put an end to the culture of the Great Mother and sowed the seeds of patriarchy and a dominator society. Gimbutas was ridiculed for decades for her Kurgan theory and died before she was finally vindicated in 2018 when DNA studies confirmed her findings. And this was announced in a public lecture in Chicago by, I can't remember his name, I'm afraid. Her discovery that for 3,000 years there was no evidence of war, confirms that war is not an integral part of the human experience, as a recent book on war by Margaret Macmillan suggests. One of the last great goddesses of this era was Artemis of Ephesus, whose temple was one of the wonders of the ancient world. Here is a reconstruction of what it looked like. Her face, hands, and feet are black, pointing to the dark phase of the moon. Above her many breasts is a great lunar crescent with a row of acorns beneath it. Above her many breasts is a great crescent with a row of acorns beneath it, and various animals and bees adorn her body. She represents nature, Great Mother. That statue stood in her temple, by the way, and is now in Naples. I think we can look to the Neolithic Great Mother and the great goddesses of the Bronze Age, such as Artemis of Ephesus and Isis of Egypt, for the origin of the Platonic concept of the soul of the cosmos, and the later concept of Plotinus's Anima Mundi, and his famous saying, which David has often quoted, "All things breathe together." They may also be the origin of the image of the Gnostic Sophia and Shekinah in the mystical Jewish tradition of Kabbalah, named as divine wisdom and the Holy Spirit, and conceived as an all-embracing, feminine, cosmic entity in whose life we live. Now we come to the Great Father of the Solar Era and a totally different epoch. Around 2000 BCE, we enter the Solar Era of the Great Father, which has lasted 4,000 years until the present time. This is the era of our separation from nature, when our developing conscious mind lost touch with the deeper matrix from which it was emerging and drew away from the maternal realm of an ensouled nature. The Great Mother was gradually replaced by the Great Father. This era saw the rise of powerful states and priesthoods and the religions we know today, which worship the Great Father. It is the era of what Riane Eisler has called the dominator societies, and it has lasted until the present time when we are still threatened by dominator leaders, but also are facing the shadow aspect of the solar era and our utter failure to respect the law of the sacredness of life. Whereas the focus of lunar culture was an ensouled cosmos and mythic participation in the life of a sacred cosmic order, the focus of solar culture was on the conquest and mastery of nature, the development of the rational mind, and the differentiation of the outstanding individual from the tribal group. It is above all the age of the individual, and specifically the warrior, who dons the mantle of the solar hero. This applies as much today as it did 4,000 years ago. Trump is a parody of the solar hero. The solar era is about the rise of a succession of vast empires, territorial conquest, and the control exercised by warrior leaders and immensely powerful priesthoods serving a male god. It is about the outstanding individuals leading exploration and discovery and the growing empowerment of humanity that these bring. It is about the quest for knowledge and understanding of the life in which all our lives are embedded. Quite different from the lunar culture. It's a different focus and a different quest, as it were. Its shadow aspect has been the sacrificial rituals of war, practiced on a monumental scale, which have caused horrendous suffering. The emphasis of this 4,000-year-long solar era is on the ascent of man, rather than on relationship with the earth and the cosmos, as in the earlier lunar era. The lunar way of knowing was subjugated to the solar way, and under the influence of solar mythology, first nature, then the cosmos, were desouled. Now, the primary mythic theme of the solar era is the battle between light and darkness, good and evil, leading to the battle to conquer and subdue nature in the service of man. And we're still living in that cosmology. The earliest image that portrays this battle is the Babylonian god Marduk killing the mother goddess Tiamat, portrayed as a dragon. Marduk split her corpse in half and made heaven from one half and earth from the other. And this image offered a preview of what happened to the masculine and feminine archetypes during the solar era and the polarization between them. The masculine archetype was identified with spirit, and the feminine archetype was associated with nature, was split off from spirit. Nature and the earth were no longer sacred. Man became identified with spirit, quite naturally, as he was ordering everything, and woman was identified with nature and was subjugated to man. Now, the myth of the fall in Genesis 2 and 3 is the second major myth of the solar era. We now know that it was the deliberate creation of the Deuteronomist priesthood in the first temple in Jerusalem in 621 BCE. Their primary aim was to get rid of the goddess Asherah, who was the consort of Yahweh and with him co-creator of the world. This they successfully accomplished, all evidence of her and the shamanic rituals devoted to her worship. The divine feminine was banished from Judaism, with the exception of Kabbalah. Now, this myth did untold harm to women who were identified with Eve, and untold harm to life in this world because it was regarded as contaminated by the fall and no longer sacred. It created a fearful, judgmental, punishing image of God, terrifying to many people. When the image of deity changed from Great Mother to Great Father, divine immanence was lost. The emphasis was on the transcendence of God or spirit. Earth became a place of exile and punishment for primordial sin. Man was given dominion over the earth, but he was no longer part of the divine order. He lived in a world contaminated by the fall and subject to sin, suffering, and death, all of which were introduced by Eve. Now, this myth gave us a very negative image of our presence here. It inflicted a trauma on us from which we have never recovered. It gave rise to an unconscious will to power over life and the projection of guilt onto other people, because people don't like feeling guilty, and therefore they project it onto other people. The idea of vicarious atonement, that sinful humanity needed the sacrificial death of the Son of God to redeem it, derives from this myth. Now I can turn to the four paths to union of Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and Christianity. In complete contrast to this depressing myth, the shaman teachers of the four spiritual traditions all spoke of our essential, divine, immortal nature and the path to the experience of it. They kept alive or rediscovered the wisdom of the lunar era, that everything was sacred and connected, and they each emphasized the awakening of the heart and the way to the transformation of consciousness. So in the Hindu Upanishads, we have the Atman within every human soul. In Buddhism, we have the Buddha Siddhartha talking about our Buddha nature. With Lao Tzu, we have the way to harmonize our life with that of the Tao. And with Jesus, we have the teaching about the kingdom of heaven within us and all around us. All the sacred literature of India, from the Vedas through the Upanishads to the treatises on yoga, teaches the method of inner transformation, which leads to the experience of enlightenment or union with the divine ground. The Upanishads were written by anonymous men who were disillusioned with the Brahmin priesthood and had withdrawn into the forest from the 9th to the 4th centuries BCE. and they wrote some of the most sublime expressions of the human spirit. If you are not familiar with them, I urge you to read them. Here is just one verse from the Svetasvatara Upanishad. Glory be to that God who is in the fire, who is in the water, who is in the plants and trees, who is in all things in this vast creation. Unto that spirit be glory and glory. From Vedic times, the great seers, shamans, or sages of India were recognized as masters of meditation and the path to union with the divine ground. They taught their followers to look inward to the source of consciousness as the invisible ground of the world we perceive with our senses. They taught that the cause of evil is not sin, but ignorance. They taught that all life derives from a primal one. Therefore, all life is a unity. Brahman is the supreme creator, present in every atom of life. There is nothing outside or beyond Brahman. Divinity is present as the Atman in every individual soul, and the material world is a manifestation or epiphany of Brahman. So all life is sacred, all life is divine. They taught that the material universe is the body of God, and this is the underlying concept of Advaita or non-duality. In the words of the great sage Ramakrishna, God did not so much create the world, he became the world. They all, without exception, taught non-violence. They knew that reincarnation is the long process whereby we become reunited with the divine ground over many lives. And these words from the Bhagavad Gita give the essence of this teaching. He who sees that the Lord of all is ever the same in all that is, immortal in the field of mortality, he sees the truth. And when a man sees that the God in himself is the same God in all that is, he hurts not himself by hurting others. Then he goes indeed to the highest path. Now, Hinduism has a shadow aspect, particularly modern Hinduism, and it became the dominator model, not the participatory model. Although this teaching can still be found in India with individual teachers, Hinduism today bears no relation to the teaching of the Upanishads. There's the belief that matter is inferior to spirit, and this contradicts the principle of non-duality, but it's very deeply embedded in Hindu beliefs today. Secondly, there's the existence of the caste system, which dates back probably 4,000 years, whereby the population was assigned to specific social levels and roles, with the poorest, the untouchables, or Dalits as they are called today, relegated to the lowest level and treated with appalling contempt and cruelty. So much for the compassion of the Upanishads. And there's the belief that women are inferior to men because they are closer to nature and share nature's inferior status. Note the prevalence of rape and murder of women in India. There's recently been another horrific one, which is no arrests have been made, and absolute contemptible treatment of women in India. There's a descent into violence, as we've seen with the attacks on Muslims by Hindus rising up. As you know, partition separated the Hindus and the Muslim peoples into different countries, but this situation has never really been resolved, and now and then it erupts into violence. Of all the many approaches to spirituality in India, only Tantra fully integrates woman, the body, and nature with spirit. I may say this is all very brief summary because there's no time. I have done these talks in a longer form on my website. You can find them there. Now we come to Buddhism. The word Buddha means awake. To the people who asked him what kind of being he was, he answered, I am awake. Whereas Hinduism has no one individual at its heart, Buddhism has an individual so extraordinary and charismatic, so brilliant a teacher, with such profound psychological insight, that millions flocked to listen to him during his 45 years of teaching in India. The veneration in which he was held was universal and unique. Born in 563 BCE into a princely family that he left at the age of 29, he knew he had a cosmic mission to accomplish. I think that, like Jesus 500 years later, he was someone who came to this planet from higher regions of the universe to help humanity. I also think that the Buddha, like Jesus, had a shamanic initiation on the night of his awakening, an experience of cosmic consciousness as described by Richard Buck in his book of that name. The fact that he is sitting beneath a sacred tree and on the coils of the great serpent king suggests he had a shamanic experience of awakening to the imperishable state of the Buddha nature and the nature of reality. Following it, he sat for 49 days in a state of samadhi or bliss, and out of this experience came his teaching of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path to Awakening. His teaching was directed to all, regardless of caste or gender, and in this he challenged the Brahmin priests. At its core was non-violence, tolerance of difference, and compassion for all life. So what is enlightenment, everybody might ask? And he would answer, it is the experience of our original Buddha mind or whole state of being, giving rise to perfect freedom, perfect contentment and joy, deep insight and trust in life, and elimination of the fear of death. And he said that the four immeasurables were equanimity, love, compassion, and joy. And he said that enlightenment is barren without these four immeasurables. Essentially, these qualities radiate from the heart and are intrinsic to the Buddha state of luminous awareness. Am I going at about the right pace for people? Any comments coming up? Difficulty?
Very good.
Okay. Now, Hinduism and Buddhism both emphasize the need for release from the spell of Maya and from samsara, or the chain of causation and the wheel of rebirth. And theirs seems to be an up-and-out cosmology. There is no apparent desire to return to this planet, but to seek final release from it. I got this idea from Chris Bache. It's not my own, because he lent me his lectures when I was doing preparation for these 4 talks. So I would honor him with saying that this idea comes from him. I think it's very interesting. Now I come to Taoism and the Tao. The Chinese have always used images to convey the most profound insights of their sages. And what better illustration than the Tao of the indissoluble relationship between the male and female energies that are the creative ground of all life. Neither is supreme. Each is dependent on and in relationship with the other. From the source which is everything and no thing, whose image is the circle, came heaven and earth, yang and yin, the male and female principles whose dynamic interaction brings into being the world we see and maintains it in balance. The Tao is both the source and the creative process of life which flows from it, imagined as a mother who is the root of heaven and earth and beyond all, yet within all, giving birth to all, containing all, and nurturing all. Taoism, like Hinduism, did not separate matter from spirit. It had a profound and respectful relationship with nature and the body. There was balance and relationship between yin and yang, the feminine and masculine principles. The practice of Taoism showed great respect for women, which was not upheld later in Chinese history. Its aims, as in Hinduism and Buddhism, were non-violence and self-realization, exactly the same aims. Taoism was not an up-and-out cosmology, but one where, like the lunar culture of the Great Mother, everything was connected. Man was not separate from nature, nor trying to dominate and control it, rather to bring himself into harmonious relationship with it, not to escape from the world, but to relate to the world. Now, the elusive essence of Taoism is expressed in the Tao Te Ching, the only known work of the great sage Lao Tzu, who, legend says, was persuaded to write down the 81 sayings when, reaching the end of his life, he had embarked on his last journey to the mountains of the West. The word Tao means the fathomless source, the one, the deep. Day is the way to the Tao comes into being, growing organically like a plant from the deep ground or source of life, from within outwards. Qing is the slow, patient shaping of that process through the activity of a creative intelligence within nature that is expressed as the organic patterning within all life, a kind of cosmic DNA. The Tao does nothing, yet nothing is left undone. Painting was one of the most sublime methods that the Taoists had for expressing this sense of harmony with nature. So I brought this one verse from Lao Tzu. The mind of man searches outward all day. The further it reaches, the more it opposes itself. Only those who look inward can censor their passions and cease their thoughts. Being able to cease their thoughts, their minds become tranquil. To tranquilize the mind is to nourish one's spirit. To nourish the spirit is to return to nature. This picture shows the retreats to which the Taoist sages retired to write and to contemplate and to talk to each other. Now I come to Christianity. Jesus, like the great shaman teachers of the East, taught a path of transformation leading to union with the divine ground, with the emphasis on love, compassion, and non-violence. He said that the kingdom of heaven is within us and is spread out upon the earth, although we cannot see it. Everyone is a son or daughter of God. His essential teaching is found in the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew, and in certain of the parables like the pearl of great price and the mustard seed that can grow into a great tree. But it is also necessary to read the Gnostic Gospels in the Nag Hammadi texts and to be aware of the teaching of the Essenes, because it is probable, indeed likely, that Jesus was brought up in an Essene community. It is also possible that in his 20s he traveled both to Egypt and to India, where he spent some years in a Buddhist university. What is certain is that he, like the Buddha, had a shamanic initiation and an experience of cosmic consciousness, possibly during the 40 days he spent in the wilderness, which was the foundation of his teaching, his ability to heal, and his 3-year mission. But what was originally a direct shamanic transmission of the path to union with the divine ground became, by the 4th century, a faith that put its emphasis on belief and belonging to the Church of Rome as the path to God. The Jesus who has the message becomes the Christ who is the message. I don't think anyone is to blame for this. It simply happened because the church became part of the Roman Empire, and it was inevitable that it would become what it was. And one may regret it, but one can't blame, really. The Christian church did not teach its flock about the indwelling spirit, the kingdom of heaven within us. There was only one Son of God. Belonging to the church and accepting its doctrine was the path to salvation and the kingdom of heaven. The Catholic Church fell into the dominator mode, and its aim was absolute power. And instead of becoming a religion of love, it became a religion of terror for at least 5 centuries when the Inquisition was in control in its persecution of heresy. It incited people to conquest and to conversion, and it incited the seizure of the land of conquered peoples, which was legitimized by the papal bulls of the 15th century. The emphasis was on sin and guilt derived from the myth of the fall. An original sin, which was St. Augustine's bright idea, was transmitted through the sexual act and became church dogma from 418, or church doctrine from 418 of the Christian era. There was a desacralization of nature and the belief that matter is inferior to spirit. All this was sort of gradually brought into Christian teaching. Earth is not our true home, but a place to which we have been exiled because of the sin of Adam and Eve. So Christianity is really an up and out cosmology. There was no point in staying around to this life full of suffering, sin, and misery. There is one further factor that needs to be included in this story, and this was the decision by the Roman Church to eradicate all trace of Jesus' marriage to Mary Magdalene. Think what it would have meant for the development of Western civilization if the union of Jesus and Mary Magdalene had been celebrated by the church founded in his name. Had their marriage been recognized and Jesus not turned into the celibate Son of God, Christianity would have had a totally different history, without a celibate male priesthood concealing deep problems with sexuality, and without the persecution of women in the witch trials that scarred Europe for 5 centuries and resulted in the death at the stake of an estimated 100,000 women. So, in my view, the Christian image of God or spirit separated the creator from creation, opening an abyss between spirit and nature. Spirit was masculine, nature was feminine and inferior to spirit. Both nature and woman were regarded as subject to man. This world was presented as a fallen world contaminated by sin. Nature was no longer experienced as sacred as it had been in the shamanic cultures which preceded patriarchy. Spirit was no longer immanent in nature, and animism was ruthlessly eradicated. Kabbalah was the only cosmology in the West that held the image of soluble union between the masculine and feminine aspects of the Godhead in creator and creation. However, the great Christian mystics had a shamanic experience of cosmic consciousness or something like it. So we have Hildegard of Bingen, St. Francis, Meister Eckhart, Jakob Boehme, and the alchemists, whom I will come to later. So the patriarchal priesthoods put their faith, the emphasis on faith, belief, and belonging to a religious institution. They banished the divine feminine from their image of deity. They did not teach respect for woman, the body, and the earth and all its species. And this has led eventually to a desouling of the world and to a devaluation of human existence on this planet. I think this explains how and why, in a worldwide culture, we have come to believe that it doesn't matter what we do to matter, that nature and matter are not part of spirit, that we are not part of spirit. The influence of up and out cosmologies and the loss of the divine feminine goes far to explain why we are no longer aware that the earth is part of a sacred cosmic order as we once were in lunar culture. So the end result of the process of desouling the world was the nuclear bomb. How else did it become possible for us to support the creation of nuclear weapons that would destroy not only millions of innocent lives, but devastate vast swathes of the earth in a nuclear winter? What about the deadly residues from the new reactors that are needed to make the bombs? And why haven't religious leaders of all religions named them as evil? Why have people go along with their leaders? We only have the CCNA that really is against them. So the religions of the solar era have failed to address the fundamental questions: what is the purpose of the physical universe? Why is life on Earth something we should try to escape from? What is the purpose of our lives on this planet? Why are we here? Who put us here? Some of these questions come from Chris Bache, and I must acknowledge him again. Are we a sinful, fallen species? Or are we part of the divinity of the whole of life, but still unconscious of this? What have we failed to understand? What insight have we missed, or have we been prevented from understanding and from knowing. Now I come to science, and materialist or reductionist science, first of all. The separation between spirit and nature, deeply embedded in Christian theology, was transmitted to science from the 17th to the 20th centuries, when the influence of Christianity was beginning to wane. Freed from the control of the church, science began to explore the physical world and to develop rapidly in many different areas. It has brought us enormous benefits through its many incredible discoveries. But it has sadly concluded that we are the only sentient beings in an inanimate universe that is without life, meaning, purpose, direction, or intelligence. This bleak philosophy has taken on the power and absolutism of an ideology, so that it slipped into the same mode as the dominator mode of the previous Catholic Church. Materialist science came to reject God and the soul as illusory creations of the religious or superstitious mind. And the result today is that in a secular culture, scientific rational man rules supreme, a hubristic, one-eyed consciousness that is split off from relationship with nature and with soul. The earth and her resources are viewed as subject to man. The four main tenets of scientific materialism, as I see them, are as follows. The physical material universe is the only one that exists. The whole universe is basically a mechanism. It has no conscious beings in it apart from ourselves. We, as observers, are separate from what we observe. Consciousness begins and ends with the physical brain, and when the brain dies, consciousness ceases to exist. These beliefs offer no foundation for moral values, which are increasingly vanishing from our world. Is it surprising that so many people are showing symptoms of mental illness and are driven to drugs and suicide because their life has no meaning and no value, particularly young people, absolutely tragic, taking their lives because their lives have no meaning. And there's nothing to give them meaning in our culture. So I've brought this picture by Odilon Redon, which is one of my favorites, because it brilliantly reflects the one-eyed left hemispheric consciousness of reductionist or materialist science. And I would say that the effects on the world are the loss of the feminine archetype, which is lying below the Cyclops, down below in the beautiful nature below. The loss of the feminine archetype and the loss of soul have been catastrophic. Instinctive knowledge of the holy unity of things, reverence for the interconnection of all aspects of life, trust in the power of the imagination and the faculty of intuition, all this as a way of relating to life through participation rather than through dominance and control, has almost been lost. Now, I'm a Jungian analyst, and I follow what Jung said, and he said this. He warned of the dangers of this materialist philosophy, and he commented, as scientific understanding has grown, so our world has become dehumanized. Man feels himself isolated in the cosmos because he is no longer involved in nature and has lost his emotional unconscious identity with natural phenomena. No voices now speak to man from stones, plants, and animals, nor does he speak to them believing they can hear. His contact with nature has gone. In another passage, he describes how, as the conscious mind gained more and more autonomy and independence from the deeper matrix of the psyche, the whole superstructure of consciousness became disengaged from the age-old instinctive ground out of which it has developed. Consciousness, thus torn from its roots, he said, possesses a Promethean freedom, but it also partakes of the nature of a godless hubris. And so here I have a picture of the godless hubris of Trump, who thinks he is a Christian, but who's making declarations like, we must have American dominance in space, we must make America great. Great in what? In power or in service of humanity? And I'll read you this prophecy from the fourth Gospel of the Essenes, written at the time of Christ by an unknown person. And these four Gospels were discovered in the Vatican archives by a Hungarian called Székely in the 1930s. And this is what he translated from the Aramaic. But there will come a time when the Son of Man will turn his face from his earthly mother and betray her, even denying his mother and his birthright. Then shall he sell her into slavery, and her flesh shall be ravaged, her blood polluted, and her breath smothered. He will bring the fire of death into all parts of her kingdom, and his hunger will devour all her gifts, and leave in their place only desert. All these things he will do out of ignorance of the law, and as a man dying slowly cannot smell his own stench, so will the Son of Man be blind to the truth, that as he plunders and ravages and destroys his earthly mother, so does he plunder and ravage and destroy himself. For he was born of his earthly mother, and he is one with her, and all that he does to his mother, even so does he do to himself. So the religions of the world have taught us to believe, but they have not taught us about the marvel and divinity of our essential being and our profound relationship with the divinity of the whole universe. Materialist science has taught us that our potential and destiny are limited to the material universe and our present state of consciousness. Both have created in their ignorance a kind of prison in which we live unconsciously, believing what we are told. And Rumi, who already saw this in the 12th or 13th, I can't remember when he lived, 13th century, he said, "Why do you stay in prison when the doors are open?" Perhaps we need to look at the effect that our beliefs, both religious and scientific, have had on the earth. The facts of climate change are now irrefutable. Sir David Attenborough tells us that the Garden of Eden is no more. We have changed the world so much that scientists say we are in a new anthropological age, the Anthropocene, the age of humans. Human beings have overrun the world, he says. We are the most dominant and popular species on Earth. Our effect on the natural world has been catastrophic, and the speed of change on our planet has been more rapid than at any time in the last 10,000 years. The threat to it has never been greater than it is today. In his new book, A Life on Our Planet, which I've just read, he says that we have come to regard the Earth as our planet, run by mankind, by humankind, for humankind. We have moved from being part of nature to being apart from nature. He gives a frightening statistic that we humans and the animals we raised to eat make up 96% of the total mammals on Earth, and wild mammals make up just 4%. These are the warning words of a man who has profound respect for the life of all species on Earth and their interconnectedness with each other. When we look at the destruction of the equatorial forests of the Amazon and Indonesia, the whitening and dying of the coral reefs because of the warming oceans, the devastating fires in Australia, Brazil, California, and Oregon, the ubiquitous presence of plastic in all the oceans, we can see the effects of our arrogance and hubris in relation to the Earth. But too many of us, including too many governments, still cannot see it. In Greta Thunberg, we can see the ancient role of the Sibyl returning. In the past, the Sibyl warned people of the error of their ways, threatening the retribution of the gods if they didn't change them. Sometimes she stood between armies and shamed them into withdrawing from engaging in battle. Greta is totally fearless. She has listened to the scientists whose warnings are growing increasingly urgent and desperate. So perhaps it is time to look at alchemy and the necessary process of transformation we are going to have to go through now, a descent into the underworld and a confrontation with the shadow of the solar era. Now, the great work of alchemy was the reunion of spirit and nature. Alchemy flows beneath the surface of Christian civilization like a river of gold. It throws a rainbow bridge between matter and spirit, the human and the divine. It refines and transmutes the base metal of our understanding, so that we, evolved from the very substance of the stars, can know that we participate in the mysterious realm of spirit while living in this physical dimension of reality. The alchemists knew that each one of us carries the royal value, the potential realization of a fully awakened consciousness, symbolized by the mysterious stone or gold, and by this picture of the completion of the great work, which signifies the reunion of nature and spirit. Unfortunately, I have no time to explain, but you can see the alchemist standing on the bodies of two lions with one head and relating the world all around him to the world of the spirit above. Faced with the effects of climate change and with this great horrifying pandemic, the whole of humanity is now going through the first stage of the alchemical process of transformation, a dark night of the soul called the Nigredo. Over 1 million people have already died and many more will die. The Nigredo describes a descent into the underworld, an arduous process of death and rebirth, as in the great myths of earlier civilizations. A harrowing experience that may help us to alter the path we are on and to reconnect with the earth and the cosmos. It is an encounter with death, with grief, with loss, with fear, confusion, intense anxiety, and deep depression and helplessness. It is described by the alchemist as a blackness blacker than black, and its symbol is the raven. Painful and even terrifying as this experience is, it is essential for us to undergo this descent if there is ever to be a radical change in the collective consciousness of humanity. The alternative is extinction. The Nigredo is the first stage of a profound alchemical process of transformation, an urgent call from the depths of the cosmos for humanity to awaken. The wheat growing out of the grave signifies regeneration after death, as do the seeds of a man that the man is sowing. The picture has its origin in the rites of Osiris in Egypt. Or solutio. It's about connecting with a neglected feminine value, with the soul, with the heart. It's about shedding many tears and the dawning of insight, illumination, and wisdom. And each of the alchemists had to go through this process of Nigredo and solutio before they came to the final stage of illumination. And symbols are the queen, the moon, moonlight, the white stone, the rose, the lily, the dove, which has always been a symbol of the Great Mother, and the swan. Now, Christianity has taught that the Redeemer is outside us, and that our ultimate redemption as Christians has been assured by Christ's sacrificial death. Alchemy taught that we need to redeem and rescue the lost aspect of spirit that is hidden within each one of us and within nature, working with spirit to accomplish this awakening within us. We need to restore the divinity to nature that we lost through our separation from it during the solar era. This gives great significance to the individual, since the divine drama of redemption is consummated in and through us. It is an awesome and heroic task. Each one of us carries the mystery of the incarnation of spirit in this dimension. Alchemy is a sacred rite of unification, an opus divinum, which ultimately reveals the divinity of nature and our innate divinity as sons and daughters of God. The great work of alchemy is about restoring our lost relationship with the divine ground. It is about the creation of an immortal body of light, the integration of body, soul, and spirit, and the conscious reunion with the unus mundus, or the divine ground of being. This reunion was known as the sacred marriage, and it is symbolized here by the figure of the hermaphrodite. This is what is happening now as we move into a new understanding of reality. Now, the Hubble telescope has vastly expanded our understanding of the incredible size, scale, and scope of the universe. The more we learn about the true scale and scope of the universe, the more we discover its extraordinary intelligence and creativity, the more incredible it is to say that the plan is to leave it all behind, and the more we need a new story that could free us from the limitations of the old stories and give us a more enlightened view of our presence on this planet and our destiny here, as well as our profound relationship with the earth and the cosmos. Got to take a drink. Now, this painting by my husband is of the tree of life, with a woman who may be a goddess holding a divine child and attended by an angel holding the Grail cup. It is an image of the revelatory nature of the new story, and it took him 8 years to complete. The new story is a revolutionary shift in collective thinking. It really is a revelation, and one that is desperately needed now. We are moving out of the solar era and into the stellar era, or starry era, and this requires a fundamental change of consciousness or understanding. Now, the new story comes from a different branch of science, the science of quantum physics. And quantum physics tells us that the whole universe is a unified field, a cosmic web of life, which connects all life forms in our universe and on our planet. Every atom of life interacts with every other atom, no matter how great the distance between them. So none of us is truly separate from others, or from other species of life on this planet, or from the life of the 100 billion or maybe trillion galaxies of the universe. We are not only connected through the internet, but through the infinitesimal particles of subatomic matter. In Larry Dossey's words, we are part of an infinitude of consciousness, which sustains not only our world, but the entire universe. Quantum physics mysteriously the original cosmology of the lunar era at a new level of understanding. So I'm bringing this quote from David Bohm, who suffered terribly rejected when he was a genius. The universe is an undividedness in flowing movement. We have reversed the usual classical notion that the independent elementary parts of the world are the fundamental reality, and the various systems are merely particular contingent forms and arrangements of these parts. Rather, we say that inseparable quantum interconnectedness of the whole universe is the fundamental reality, and that relatively independent behaving parts are merely particular or contingent forms within this whole. Through the emerging science of unified physics, a new cosmology is being born, a new vision of our profound relationship with an intelligent, living, and interconnected universe. And crop circles have been showing this for years. This particular one has 400 circles in it, and nobody could have possibly done it in one night. It's certainly not a human creation, although some of them have been. I did a scientific course with Nassim Haramein, and that's why I've put his name up there with this new science of unified physics. Now I'm going rapidly through a few quotations from different people which I've collected over the years. The electromagnetic quantum vacuum is a form of light. It is an underlying sea of energy that permeates every tiny volume of space, from the emptiest intergalactic void to the depths of the earth, the sun, and our own bodies. Our world of matter is like the visible foam atop a very deep ocean of light. And another one, scientists now know that particles are non-locally connected with each other throughout space. Living things of all kinds are non-locally connected through a subtle field that scientists know exists, though they don't yet understand what it is or how it works. And here, from Dr. Eben Alexander, who had an extraordinary experience, near-death experience. He did die, I think, and came back to life. says consciousness is not derivative from physical matter. All of the apparent physical world exists within consciousness. We are all manifestations of the one mind, the primordial consciousness in which all the events of the universe occur. So the new story gives us a new image of God or spirit. There may be no creator beyond creation. God or spirit or divine mind may be the invisible ground of the entire manifest universe and the ground of our own consciousness. Divine mind may not be something separate or distant from us. We may be within it, coexisting and co-creating with it. And this, to me, is one of the great revelations of our time. So Jung said this, he said, the innermost self of every human and animal, of plants and crystals, is God. And the new story tells us that we have a purpose and an agenda to accomplish, and that is to carry out the will of the cosmos for this planet, to safeguard and preserve its life, to cherish every aspect of its divinity, and to grow in insight and understanding. We have a long way to go. And this beautiful picture I took from Chris Bache's lectures because I was so enamored with it. And this new story tells us that everything is connected and that the whole universe breathes together, as Plotinus said so long ago. The indigenous people of the earth tell us that all life is sacred. We come into life as sacred beings, and when we abuse the sacredness of life, we affect all creation. And Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is spread out upon the earth, and men do not see it, in the Gospel of Thomas. And this beautiful manuscript that I'm going to have spoken at my funeral says this. The question is, who then are they that draw us, and when shall come the kingdom that is in heaven? And Jesus answers, the fowls of the air and the beasts, whatever is beneath the earth or upon the earth, and the fishes of the sea, these they are that draw you, and the kingdom of heaven is within you, and whosoever knoweth himself shall find it, and having found it, ye shall know yourselves that ye are the sons and heirs of the Father, the Almighty, and shall know yourselves that ye are in God, and God in you. The new story is about relinquishing the fear of death, knowing that all of us survive death, that we are in our essence immortal beings. This was known to the Egyptians and is known to shamanic cultures in many parts of the earth. It was known to the alchemists, and it was known to all the great teachers of India or anywhere else, but it was not known in our religious teaching. And Dr. Alexander says again that the old paradigm of birth to death represents an outdated concept that is woefully inadequate in defining the unfolding reality of expanded awareness. Materialist science is at the end of its days, as most scientists are changing their views. Now I'm coming to the eco-theologians, who are very impressive. This is Matthew Fox, who is still alive and still writing the most amazing books and essays and articles of all kinds. And he says, the killing of Mother Earth in our time is the #1 ethical, spiritual, and human issue of our planet. The cosmic Christ, the vision of Christ pervading the entire cosmos, making the universe and everything in it sacred. The incarnation does not only refer to the life of Jesus, but to the entire created order. The divine is not separate from the universe, but pervades it. So the physical universe is saturated with divinity. It is held within the embrace of the divine. And this is exactly the same concept as the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, coming round at a new level to us again. And Thomas Berry, whose work I deeply love, wrote that the natural world is the larger sacred community to which we belong. Suddenly, we awaken to the devastation that has resulted from the entire modern process. In relation to the earth, we have been autistic for centuries. He was a Catholic theologian. To attain peace among the nations in any dynamic or enduring form requires not simply political negotiation, but a new mode of consciousness. The magnitude of this change is in the order of religious conversion or spiritual rebirth. A change is needed in every phase of human life. And this, a woman called Sally McFaig, who says, what if we dared to think of our planet and indeed the entire universe as the body of God? And this is exactly the same concept as existed in the Upanishads. Barbara Marx Hubbard, who was a very great teacher and who died last year, made people aware in all her talks and lectures that we are evolution becoming conscious of itself, all of us, struggling to understand everything that I'm talking about. We are in the process of taking evolution further, becoming conscious of itself. And now Bede Griffiths talked to Andrew Harvey in 1992, and he said this: the whole human race has now come to the moment when everything is at stake, when a vast shift of consciousness will have to take place on a massive scale in all societies and religions for the world to survive. Unless human life becomes centered on the awareness of a transcendent reality that embraces all humanity and the whole universe, and at the same time transcends our present level of life and consciousness, there is little hope for us. Very few people dare to face how extreme and decisive the situation has now become. Very few people are prepared to look without illusion at our time and see it for what it is, a crucifixion on a worldwide scale of everything humanity has expected or trusted or believed in every level and in every arena. Now I'm coming towards the end, but I wanted to mention in particular Chris Bache's book, LSD and the Mind of the Universe. I know he's speaking to us in 2 weeks' time, but he has been a tremendous mentor to me, and I would like to honor him here. And he says, the physical universe is not a punishment or trap into which we have fallen and from which we must be saved. It is not a spiritual wasteland we should escape from as quickly as possible. The purpose of rebirth or reincarnation is not to spiritually awaken and then leave the physical universe. The purpose is to awaken and become a conscious player in its continuing growth and transformation. And I'm bringing these most beautiful passages again from his book. The unified field, he writes, underlying physical existence completely dissolved all boundaries. As I moved into it, all borders fell away. All appearances of division were ultimately illusory. No boundaries between incarnations, between human beings, between species, even between spirit and matter. The world of individuated existence was revealing itself to be an exquisitely diversified manifestation of a single entity. Though these experiences were extraordinary in their own right, the most poignant aspect was that what my seeing and understanding them meant to the consciousness I was with. I felt that it had been waiting for billions of years for embodied consciousness to evolve to the point where we could at last begin to see, understand, and appreciate what had been accomplished. I felt the loneliness of this intelligence, having created such a masterpiece and having no one to appreciate its work. And I wept. I wept for its isolation and in awe of the profound love which had accepted this isolation as part of a larger plan. Behind creation lies a love of extraordinary proportions, and all of existence is an expression of this love. The intelligence of the universe's design is equally matched by the depth of love that inspired it. He also said that we're surrounded by orders of reality beyond reckoning. I love that sentence, orders of reality beyond reckoning, instead of a dead universe. So to end, I've just put two things. Divine Spirit is the core of our being, and the soul is the intermediary between spirit and body. Meister Eckhart said that the body was in the soul, not the other way around. The body is the temple of the soul and the means of our being able to incarnate on this planet. At the same time, it offers us access to the many dimensions of the inner universe and the experience of the divine spirit within us. And the more we develop the capacity for love and reverence for life, the more we are in touch with this divine spirit. So the new story tells us that cosmic light and love are the foundation of our being, our consciousness, our intelligence, and our own capacity for love. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Anne. And I think everybody will agree that we've been privileged to hear an extraordinary distillation of historical and spiritual wisdom from Anne. Now, I know how much time she's put into preparing and what she's been sharing with us tonight. I mean, it's a vision of prophetic power, clarity, and all embracing in the true sense of the word, that we've gone through this extraordinary trajectory of culture and human development and evolution, and we've come to this critical time when we need exactly the kind of wisdom and synthesis that we've been hearing tonight. So I think, Anne, if we were in a lecture hall, which we're not, there would be a warm standing ovation. I certainly speak for myself, and we embrace you for what you have shared with us.
Thank you, David.